the lie you've been living, why your honesty is more powerful than your strength. Welcome to Soft Girl Era, the sacred space where strong Black women unlearn survival, rediscover softness, and reclaim the joy, rest, and freedom they deserve without guilt, without apology, and without explanation. I'm your host, LeAnne Dolce, pronounced Dolce, like sweet softness whispered in French, and I'm your guide from burnout to boundaries, from doing to being, from strong to soft and loving every second of it. Today, I want to share something with you that came from a powerful conversation I had recently with Shiretta Dunn, a woman whose journey of brutal honesty and self reclamation is reshaping how we think about healing, boundaries, and what it truly means to love ourselves. Shiretta is doing transformative work helping Black women, entrepreneurs, and professionals step into their soft girl era by learning to be honest, not just with the world, but with themselves. Her impact is profound because she's teaching us that the path to softness begins with truth. And that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, is the foundation of freedom. She is changing lives by giving women permission to stop pretending, to stop performing, and to finally tell the truth about what survival has cost them. So let's dive in. Here's what I want you to consider today. What if I told you that being brutally honest with yourself is not the opposite of softness? What if honesty, the kind that makes you squirm a little, the kind that forces you to admit you ignored red flags, stayed too long, overgave, or abandoned yourself? What if that honesty is actually the foundation of your soft girl era? For so many of us, especially Black women who have been taught to hold it all together, admitting we made mistakes, that we chose wrong, that we loved others more than we loved ourselves, feels like failure. It feels like shame. But what if we flip that? What if your honesty is not your indictment? What if it's your strategy? Let me say that again. Your honesty is your strategy. Instead of seeing self betrayal and self neglect as proof that we are broken, what if we looked at them as data, information, evidence of how we were socialized to overfunction, to love others at the expense of ourselves, to build careers and businesses on top of emotional exhaustion? Becoming honest about the ways loving others more than ourselves has impacted our relationships, our health, our children, and our identity is not about reliving the hurt. It's about reclaiming authorship of our story. This is what Shiretta Dunn shared with me. And it's what I want to leave with you today. Healing is not pretending it didn't happen. Healing, especially for Black women leaders, is understanding what happened, taking accountability for our choices, releasing shame, forgiving ourselves, and then choosing differently with softness, boundaries, and self respect. That's a radical shift. Instead of hustling for worthiness, we make honesty a form of rest and self protection. Now, let me walk you through three insights from my conversation with Sharetta that I believe will change the way you see yourself, your work, and your healing. Insight number one: brutal honesty is a form of self love, not self punishment. When we finally admit, I ignored that red flag, or I kept choosing people who asked me to abandon myself, we're not tearing ourselves down, we're turning the light on. That honesty is how we stop repeating the same relational and professional patterns. It's how we move from survival to alignment. For Black women who have been conditioned to always be the strong one, truth telling is how we stop carrying what is killing us spiritually and emotionally. Think about it. How many times have you known something was wrong, but you stayed anyway? How many times did you see the signs, the inconsistencies, the disrespect, the lack of reciprocity, and you told yourself, maybe it'll get better. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe if I just give a little more. And then years later, you're exhausted, depleted, resentful, wondering how you got here. Here's the truth: you got here because you were taught that your needs come last. You were taught that being strong means being silent. You were taught that love means sacrifice. even when the sacrifice is you. But honesty, the kind that says, I see what I did, I see why I did it, and I'm choosing differently now. That honesty is not punishment, it's permission. Permission to stop pretending, permission to stop performing, permission to finally put yourself first. And here's what makes this even more powerful: when you tell yourself the truth, you stop living in the fog, you stop second guessing yourself, you stop wondering if you're being too sensitive or too demanding. You know what happened, you know what you allowed, you know what you tolerated. And that knowledge, that clarity is what gives you the power to choose differently moving forward. Insight number two: self neglect is a learned pattern and it's reversible. There's research on Black professional women that shows how early gendered and racialized expectations of care, being responsible for everyone else, performing strength, absorbing family and community obligations, normalize self neglect over time. A study on Black professional women in South Africa found that from childhood, these women were trained to anticipate and meet others' needs. It became so normalized that by the time they reached adulthood, they didn't even recognize it as a choice anymore. It was just who they were, the one who holds everyone together. As they advanced professionally, those same expectations followed them into the workplace and motherhood. Without a language for boundaries or permission to prioritize themselves, they continually chose others over themselves, often without realizing it. The result? Chronic stress, burnout, exhaustion, health challenges, strained relationships, and a deep, pervasive fatigue that no amount of vacation days could fix. But here's the powerful part: this isn't a character flaw, it's a pattern, and patterns can be unlearned. Once we see that we were trained to put ourselves last, we can consciously retrain ourselves to center our needs, rest, and emotional safety without guilt. That's the pivot from self sacrifice to self stewardship. That's the shift from surviving to thriving. That's your soft girl era. These women in the research grew up in families and communities where being helpful, strong, and accommodating was praised and expected. Over time, these expectations hardened into identity. I am the one who holds everyone together. As they advanced professionally, those same expectations followed them into the workplace and motherhood. Without a language for boundaries or permission to prioritize themselves, they continually chose others over themselves, often without realizing it. Despite the pressure, many participants became high achieving professionals, leaders, and caregivers who maintained careers and families simultaneously. Their accomplishments demonstrate resilience, but the study shows that resilience alone is not enough when it's built on chronic self neglect. This highlights how Black women's internalization of always be strong mirrors the stories many of us carry, loving others in place of loving ourselves. It gives language and evidence to the invisible emotional labor that shapes our health, our children's experiences, and our sense of self. For entrepreneurs and professionals, it underscores why healing must include telling the truth about how we arrived at burnout and why boundaries and rest are not indulgent but essential. Insight number three: boundaries and rest are business strategies, not personality traits. As entrepreneurs and professionals, we often treat rest and boundaries as nice if you can get them instead of non negotiable operating principles. But for Black women leaders, chronic burnout and emotional depletion are tied directly to a lack of rest and recovery. Attorney and coach Twana Carter writes about something she calls the self tax. It's the cumulative cost Black women leaders pay when their health, family, and happiness are consistently pushed to the bottom of their own priority list. She cites research showing that roughly 8 in 10 Black women in leadership often feel burned out, 8 in 10. That's not a coincidence. That's a crisis. And here's what makes it worse: many of these women are high performers in demanding environments, corporate roles, entrepreneurship, leadership. where they are often the only or one of few Black women in the room. To keep doors open, they overwork, over accommodate, and ignore their own physical and emotional warning signs. Over years, this becomes a normalized lifestyle, success built on self erasure. But Carter reframes this brilliantly. She says a boundary is not a withdrawal of your value, it is what protects your capacity to keep leading at a high level. Let me say that again. A boundary is not a withdrawal of your value. It is what protects your capacity to keep leading at a high level. When we build businesses and careers around clear emotional limits, time boundaries, and intentional rest, we don't just feel better, we make sharper decisions. We sustain our creativity. We create healthier homes and workplaces. Your capacity to tell yourself the truth and protect your energy is a competitive advantage. These women achieve impressive milestones, senior leadership roles, thriving practices, influential community work. Yet the self tax means their success is accompanied by health challenges, strained relationships, and pervasive fatigue. Recognizing this tension is a critical accomplishment in itself. Naming the cost makes change possible. This powerfully illustrates the reality that when we love our roles, titles, and responsibilities more than ourselves, we pay a hidden tax in health and happiness. For Black women entrepreneurs and professionals, understanding the self tax reframes brutal honesty as a financial and emotional audit of our lives. It invites us to ask, where have I been paying a self tax? And what boundary would cancel that payment? Now, let me share one more story that brings all of this together. Kamisha L. Jones Brandon is the founder of Sister Afia Community Care, a Chicago based nonprofit that provides culturally responsive mental health care to Black women and girls. As a Black woman in mental health, Kamisha recognized that many Black women and girls were navigating depression, anxiety, burnout, and complex relationship dynamics without spaces that reflected their lived realities. She saw how often they loved others in place of loving themselves, and how shame silenced their stories. So she built Sister Afia Community Care, a community centric model that says you don't have to pretend it didn't happen. You can tell the truth, get help, and heal. The organization centers healing, community, and mental health support as core to Black women's success. And the outcomes are powerful. Black women who participate in these kinds of spaces experience increased emotional resilience and a greater capacity to sustain their work without losing themselves. Founders who integrate wellness and boundaries into their models create businesses that are more scalable and sustainable because they are not fueled solely by grind culture. The narrative shifts from I must carry everything alone to I am allowed to be supported, to rest, and to heal. Research on Black women's mental health shows that constantly suppressing vulnerability and overfunctioning to meet work demands leads to higher stress, burnout, and underutilization of mental health care. Black women founders and professionals often operate in isolation, carrying business, family, and community responsibilities without emotionally safe spaces to process their experiences. Shame and stigma around mental health and not being strong can prevent Black women from seeking help, even when they are overwhelmed. Sister Afia Community Care and similar efforts respond by creating culturally responsive mental health spaces specifically for Black women and girls, where their stories and burdens are understood without minimizing or pathologizing them. They center community, boundaries, and wellness as essential strategies for Black women founders, not optional add ons. They encourage Black women to share their stories honestly, acknowledge trauma and self neglect, and receive support in learning new ways of caring for themselves. When Black women founders intentionally build community, set boundaries, and center wellness, they develop more resilient businesses and stronger networks. The outcomes highlighted include Black women who participate in these kinds of spaces experiencing increased emotional resilience and a greater capacity to sustain their work without losing themselves. Founders who integrate wellness and boundaries into their models create businesses that are more scalable and sustainable because they are not fueled solely by grind culture. The narrative shifts from I must carry everything alone to I am allowed to be supported, to rest, and to heal. Kamisha established a nonprofit that explicitly centers Black women and girls' mental health. She provides low cost, culturally affirming counseling and support groups that help participants process trauma, learn boundaries, and reframe self worth. She serves as a model of how Black women's honesty about their emotional needs can lead to new institutions that change how our communities access care. The broader impact is both personal and systemic. Personally, participants develop healthier relationships, stronger emotional resilience, and more grounded spiritual and professional lives. Systemically, organizations like Sister Afia help redefine success for Black women entrepreneurs and professionals. Healing, community care, and emotional honesty become central to business and leadership, not separate from them. This is what happens when Black women stop hiding their pain, confront the red flags and patterns they've lived through, and build structures that support collective healing. This is what it looks like when honesty becomes strategy, when softness becomes strength, when rest becomes revolutionary. So here's my challenge to you today: stop waiting for permission to tell the truth. Stop waiting for the perfect moment to set a boundary. Stop waiting for someone else to validate your exhaustion, your pain, your need for rest. The world will never give you permission to choose yourself. You have to take it. Where in your life have you been loving others more than yourself? Name it. Say it out loud. Write it down. Acknowledge the red flag you've been ignoring. Acknowledge the pattern you've been repeating. Acknowledge the self tax you've been paying. And then choose differently. Set one boundary this week. One. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be comfortable. It just has to be honest. Say no to something that drains you. Ask for help with something you've been carrying alone. Schedule rest like it's a business meeting. Seek support from someone who sees you, not just what you produce. Your soft girl era doesn't start with perfection. It starts with a single honest choice in your favor. Because here's the truth: healing is not pretending it didn't happen, it is understanding it, taking accountability where needed, forgiving yourself, and choosing differently moving forward. And that choice, that honest, brave, soft choice, is how you reclaim your life. The world needs your honesty more than it needs your strength. The world needs your boundaries more than it needs your availability. The world needs your rest more than it needs your resilience. And you deserve to be loved by yourself first and fiercely, without apology, without explanation, and without guilt. So stop lying to yourself about how fine you are. Stop pretending the red flags weren't there. Stop sacrificing yourself on the altar of everyone else's comfort. Tell the truth. Set the boundary. Take the rest. Your soft girl era is waiting, and it starts now.